Before you worry about carbs or sugar or organic snacks, have you ever thought about what your feeding style looks like? Because research shows that it's not just what we serve at the table that's going to shape our kids' eating habits, but it's actually how we respond. It is our tone, it is our flexibility, it is our pressure. So today we're asking, what is your feeding style like? Is it helping or hindering your child's eating habits? Welcome to the Messy Bite podcast. Welcome back to the Messy Bite podcast. I'm your host, Marina Chaparro, pediatric registered dietitian, fellow mom in the trenches. And this episode, we're going to talk about parenting styles, which if you've never heard about parenting styles, you want to stick around because it could actually give you more insight in what's your style and can it be helping or hindering your kids' eating styles. In 2008, there was a study done, the Feeding Infants and Toddlers study, that highlighted something very powerful in that the way parents interact with children during meals can actually affect their eating habits. And we're not just talking about what they eat long term, but we're also talking about their satiety cues, their taste preferences, even their weight, and their overall relationship with food. And this goes back to even the parenting feeding styles that were developed, I think, early in the 70s that go by demandness and the emotional capacity. So what these four feeding styles are, it is authoritative, authoritarian, which is different. We have indulgent and uninvolved. And research consistently shows that authoritative, which includes structure and warmth, is associated with the most positive eating outcomes. If you're like, I have no idea what I am, stick around and let's find out which style describes you better and how can you maybe move towards a more authoritative style to just overall have better outcomes for your kids. So the first feeding style is authoritarian, which is the food controller. So think of this style as high structure and low responsiveness. So if we think of a graph, we're going to have up top, we're going to have high responsiveness, and down, we're going to have low responsiveness. So authoritarian parents, again, tend to want to control things. It's going to sound like you've already had enough, or you can't eat this, or no more of this, or finish the plate, no dessert until. So lots of rules, again, because they like to have structure, but the emotional component and the responsiveness really tends to fail. And here's the interesting part. A large study showed that kids who tended to have authoritarian parents, again, wanting to control the food, were more likely to be overweight compared to children of other type of parents, and in this case, authoritative. And so if you've ever heard me say that the more restrictive we are and the more we try to limit our kids by verbally saying it, the worse it will be because it is based out of research. So there's even an interesting study that moms who were concerned about their kids' weight, and in this case, it was girls, and were more likely to use restrictive feeding practices. So you've already had too much of this, sweetie, don't have more pasta. You've already had 2 plates. Tended to eat more in the long term and was associated with the higher BMI. So let that sink in for a moment. And I think oftentimes as parents, especially if you're worried about your kids' food intake or you're worried about your kids' weight, we often think that by telling them with all the best intentions, sweetie, I think you've already had too much pasta, or are you sure you want to have another slice of pizza? Let's make good choices. It all comes with the best intentions at heart. But what we don't realize is that saying these type of things or practicing these restrictive, wanting to control practices will actually backfire. And all of this work is really pioneered by this researcher, Birch, in the 80s and 90s. And she did a lot of work with even teen girls. And she even used highly palatable food with less palatable food. And when moms tended to kind of prohibit these highly palatable foods, what ended up happening is that these girls would tend to want to eat more, even in the absence of hunger. So again, it backfires. We might think we're doing a service to our kids by saying, sweetie, don't have more of this, don't do this, but it actually is making it worse because restriction only leads to increased desire. It increases preferences and it puts that food on a pedestal. So I think that's why we have to be smart about our approach and how we're talking to our kids. And the research even says this also applies to kids who are on the underweight or on the thin spectrum, right? The more we pressure them, and I have lots of clients who are also worried about their kids' weight because they're not growing properly. And the more we try to pressure them, the more we try to tell them, eat this, sweetie, it's so good. Again, it backfires and it just causes kids to not want to eat that food, or in the case of larger kids, eat more of that food. So that's why I love geeking out on this. The second feeding style is what we call the indulgent or the food pleaser. So this is low structure, right? High warmth. So they're really going to be in tune to our emotions, right? Oh my God, sweetie. Oh, sometimes people might assume that this is kind of the new parenting style, right? The positive parenting movement, but I'll get to that in a minute and why I don't think that's the case. But again, it's going to be low in structure, high in warmth. So it might look like, sweetie, what do you want to eat? Fine, that's fine. You can eat more of that, or just making separate meals because we want to avoid that meltdown. What the studies show is that children who have indulgent parents were twice as likely to be overweight compared to kids who had authoritative parents. Again, we're going to get to that to a second because that is the gold standard. Authoritative. I know it's confusing. And why do we see this? Because we have a lot of warmth and a lot of responsiveness, but we don't have structure. We lack structure. And so kids need both, which is what we're going to look for in the end. And what's interesting that Latino parents tend to be more on the indulgent side. Again, this is some of the research that has been done on Mexican American moms in lower income households. We just don't want to see them cry, and we might give them kind of what they ask for, even if it's late at night, or we might kind of disregard the schedules, or we'd say, ay, pobrecitos que tiene hambre, or maybe even abuelitas or moms. So culturally, I think this is interesting because that overindulgence, when it comes to food, we see it more so in Latinos because food for many of us, it is a form of love, right? That is how we show our love and maybe how our parents showed that they loved us. So it is very tied emotionally and it is often seen as a reward. And we have the uninvolved parent. So this is low in structure and low in responsiveness. So here we might have parents that have few boundaries and really little interaction. We might kind of have less structure, maybe unorganized meals, kind of maybe we might not know what's for dinner that day. That's there. And lastly, we have the sweet spot, just enough. So we have high structure, high responsiveness. And what's interesting is that even forgetting about the feeding style, when it comes to parenting style, what the research shows that parents who are in tune emotionally, but they also have structure and barriers, tend to have better outcomes in kids long term. And the same goes with feeding, right? So we want parents who have structures, but who are also in tune to their emotional needs. So we might see, how can this look like? We might have something like, for snacks, sweetie, do you want yogurt or fruit? Do you want crackers or a yogurt? Okay, you don't have to eat it, sweetie, but we're not going to have a meal until next time. So I'm responding to that, but I'm also giving the structure. So here is when parents really embody, we are deciding the times and they decide the how much. And what the research tells us is that across studies, authoritative feeding behaviors, again, authoritative, not authoritarian, right, are associated with positive weight outcomes, better appetite regulation because we have clearer boundaries, we have less pressure. It teaches them kind of how to trust their body. And again, it provides that structure and support. Think of this as the gold standard because we have structure, but also an emotional component. So I think this is where the movement of positive parenting might get wrong because we assume that we're just going to be in tune emotionally, but really the most effective feeding style is parents that are going to be in tune to your needs. Like, I hear you needs, like I hear you, I'm empathetic to that. But that doesn't mean I'm going to cater to you, right? I still understand that I'm still in control. I can still choose to say no, to choose boundaries. And I think this last step is the step that maybe is most misunderstood by many new generation of parents, myself included. But I think once we understand that we need the structure, our job is to provide the structure, the limits, because that is how they will thrive. It just makes it whole much better. So if you're finding yourself that you're too emotional, but you don't have that structure, my question would be, how can you start working on creating structure, on maybe even working on saying, no, sweetie, this or that, or making yourself clear. And if you're more on the authoritative side, is how can we lower that control and keep the emotion up, right? So we want that balance. Ni muy caliente, ni muy frío. Not too cold, not too warm, just right. And I think that's really hard. That sweet spot is hard. So if you've never heard about the feeding styles, I want you to start thinking, where do you fall? And I think this is where it gets personal because maybe our feeding style is reflective of how we grew up. Maybe you grew up in a household that constantly said, clean your plate or no dessert until you finish your veggies, or had a scarcity mindset, or maybe it was too permissive. It was more whatever you want. It is up to you, and they would cater and to whatever you needed. So I think this is where the reflective side in us parents really comes into play to say, hey, what type of feeding style do I have? And how can I start working towards a feeding style that is both structured and emotional? And I think that's our job for today. And so, as always, it is time for our Messy Bites Real Life Challenge. I want you to take a quiz. Take a quiz if you still are unclear of what feeding style you are. You can take a feeding style quiz. I'm going to put it here on my show notes. Identify which one you are. And I think what's important to realize is this is a work in progress, right? I think we sometimes might have a couple of traits here and a couple of traits here that might show up, but it's realizing that these aren't the practices that we want, and how can we really reel it back in and kind of continue doing the work. So I hope you liked this episode. Now I'm making you think not just about what you're feeding your kid, but actually how you are feeding your child, because the how might be more impactful than the what. Surprise, surprise. So thank you so much for watching or listening. As always, remember to subscribe so you can continue getting more of my episode. Hasta la próxima. Until next time, guys.